Waves went through the church when Pastor Charles Jenkins suddenly collapsed right in the middle of his powerful Sunday sermon. One moment he was preaching with passion, and the very next moment chaos broke out as people rushed to the pulpit. You won't believe how quickly everything changed inside that sanctuary. At first, his voice had only started to shake a little. His hand was gripping the pulpit tighter, and some thought it was just part of the emotions he was pouring into the message. But here's the shocking part. His strength failed, and within seconds, he fell forward, leaving the congregation screaming, crying, and running in panic. Eyewitnesses later described the moment as unreal, saying it felt like time had stopped. One woman explained that at first they believed he had fainted, but the fear in the voices around them told a different story. Others shouted and prayed loudly, begging God to keep their pastor alive. Let me tell you, this was not an ordinary Sunday. This was the moment when destiny took an unexpected turn, changing the entire atmosphere of what had started as a day of worship. Trained medical members inside the church rushed forward, checking his pulse and trying to keep him steady, while ushers attempted to control the panic. Some people ran to call 911, while others dropped to their knees in prayer. Within minutes, paramedics came rushing into the sanctuary with a stretcher. What was once a place filled with joyful songs now turned into a place filled with sobs and heavy silence. People stood frozen, unable to understand what they had just witnessed. As Pastor Jenkins was carried out on the stretcher, members of the congregation followed in tears. The choir that had been singing earlier now stood quietly, some covering their faces, others holding each other. Outside the church, flashing lights from ambulances and police cars painted the streets, while church members held hands in prayer circles, crying and pleading for his survival. The craziest part was how fast everything had changed. In only a matter of minutes, their strong and energetic pastor was being rushed toward the ICU in critical condition. The hospital confirmed later that he was alive but in serious state, placed under close watch as doctors tried to understand what had happened. But this is where it gets interesting, because the more details started to come out, the more questions people began to ask. Was it exhaustion? Was it stress? Or was there something more behind his sudden collapse that no one was ready to talk about yet? People were left shocked, desperate, and restless for answers, while rumors began spreading online faster than anyone could control. Inside the hospital, the atmosphere was heavy as doctors worked urgently to stabilize Pastor Jenkins. The church had only received the first short update that he was in critical but stable condition, but beyond that, details were not revealed. Let me tell you, this silence only made the situation more confusing. Family members stayed close to his bedside, refusing to leave him alone for even a moment. His wife was described as heartbroken but strong, quietly asking for privacy while encouraging everyone to keep praying. Church leaders also rushed to the hospital, some taking turns visiting his room, while others tried to calm the congregation, who were now flooded with fear and questions. Meanwhile, social media had already exploded. Within minutes of the collapse, videos from inside the church spread online, showing the panic after he fell. Hashtags like #PrayForJenkins began trending, while thousands of comments poured in from people all over the country. But here is the shocking part. Alongside the prayers and love, rumors began to rise too. Some people suggested it was a hidden health issue, while others whispered about stress connected to ministry politics. The lack of transparency from the hospital made these voices louder, and soon the story became more than just a health crisis. It turned into controversy. What makes this story different? It was not only about Pastor Jenkins' health, but also about the burden pastors carry behind the scenes. Insiders started hinting that Jenkins had been pushing himself too hard in the weeks leading to his collapse. He had been traveling, preaching, attending meetings, and fulfilling music commitments without taking proper rest. Destiny took an unexpected turn because instead of slowing down, He reportedly brushed off his exhaustion to keep serving. The truth is, pastors like him often hide their weakness, afraid of letting people down. But this moment exposed the reality that even strong leaders have limits. As hours passed, the ICU became the center of hope and fear. Some insiders quietly shared that he was showing small but positive signs of response, like movement and moments of awareness, which gave the family hope. But doctors warned that the next 24 hours were going to be very critical. The craziest part was that while his health was being fought for inside those hospital walls, outside the story was growing bigger. News channels picked it up, gospel artists sent messages, and leaders like Bishop T.D. Jakes and Kirk Franklin asked their followers to storm heaven with prayers. Everyone was united in faith, but whispers of doubt and speculation could not be stopped. By the next day, the entire gospel community was talking about Pastor Jenkins. Support came pouring in from every corner of the nation. Fellow pastors, gospel singers, and even celebrities who had worked with him shared emotional posts online, calling him a brother, a mentor, and a true servant of God. Let me tell you, the love was overwhelming. Outside his church in Chicago, members gathered through the night with candles in their hands, singing softly and praying with tears in their eyes. Families stood side by side, holding on to hope that their beloved pastor would open his eyes and return to the pulpit. But here is the shocking part. Not everyone was focused only on prayer. Social media, while filled with encouragement, also became a place of debate. Some people questioned why the church was not sharing more about his condition. Others suggested that his collapse was the result of hidden struggles, either physical or emotional. This is where it gets interesting because suddenly the story was no longer just about one man. It became a bigger conversation about the pressures pastors face. A few critics even said large churches put too much weight on their leaders, expecting them to be strong all the time without realizing the cost it takes on their health. The craziest part was that these discussions created a divide. On one side, thousands of people stood firm in prayer, refusing to listen to negative voices. On the other side, rumors kept spreading, questioning his lifestyle, his schedule, and even the leadership of the church. Some insiders revealed that Jenkins had shown signs of exhaustion weeks earlier, but refused to step back, believing his work for God could not stop. That revelation made people wonder, was this collapse a warning not just for him, but for the entire congregation? Church leaders tried to calm the storm, asking people to focus on prayer instead of gossip. Yet, the pressure continued to rise. Behind closed doors, the elders of the church began holding serious meetings, not only about how to handle the rumors, but also about how the church would survive if Jenkins needed a long recovery. What makes this story different? It was no longer only about his health. It was now about the future of the ministry he had built, and whether the congregation was ready to stand strong without his constant presence. Inside the hospital, the fight for Pastor Jenkins' recovery continued with doctors monitoring him around the clock. Every small sign of progress brought relief, but the truth was clear. This was not going to be an easy journey. One insider shared that when he briefly opened his eyes, he whispered, "Tell the church, I love them." Let me tell you, that moment broke everyone who heard it, but it also gave hope that his spirit was still fighting, even if his body was weak. Still, doctors warned that a full recovery would only be possible if he took significant time away from the pulpit. But here is the shocking part. Those words from the doctors shook the leadership of the church. Private discussions began about succession plans, temporary replacements, and how the congregation could carry on if Jenkins was absent for months. For many, the idea of worship without his powerful voice felt impossible. Yet, this is where it gets interesting because his collapse forced everyone to face a truth they had ignored for too long. One man cannot carry the weight of an entire ministry alone. Outside the hospital, the gospel community remained united. Prayer chains continued. Worship concerts were dedicated to him, and messages of love spread across the country. But the craziest part was the growing debate that surrounded his collapse. Some saw it as nothing more than a health emergency, while others believed it was a divine warning, an urgent call for the church to stop putting impossible expectations on leaders and start sharing the burden together. One elder even said, maybe God allowed this to remind us that even our strongest need rest. Destiny took an unexpected turn that morning, and it left a lasting mark not just on one congregation, but on the entire gospel community. The story of Pastor Charles Jenkins was no longer only about a collapse in the pulpit. It became a symbol of the hidden battles leaders face, the weight of spiritual responsibility, and the power of a community coming together in crisis. And while his road to recovery remained uncertain, one thing was clear. The conversation his collapse started would echo far beyond the walls of Fellowship Church, challenging how faith, leadership, and human limits are understood.